The second element of the innovator's method is the problem. And what I want you to think about and remember when you talk about the problem element of innovation process is to discover the job to be done. Let me explain a little bit more. The common trap here is that as soon as we come up with an insight, we almost immediately leap to the solution without deeply understanding first, what problem are we actually solving? I saw this manifest, for example, in many common innovations. Think, for example, of the Segway. That was a device that was supposed to revolutionize how we transport ourselves. It's actually technically very sophisticated. But without an understanding of what problem you're solving, it didn't have nearly the revolutionary impact that its investors imagined it would. Now, many of us make fun of the Segway today, but actually there are some problems for which the Segway is very well adapted. For example, if you want to go on a tour of a large city or park, a Segway is a great device to get around and do that. So matched with the right problem, this invention becomes a powerful innovation. So the trap that we fall into is we immediately lock onto a solution in our minds when we need to first take a step back and ask ourselves, what problem are we solving? And in particular, this happens because it was a symptom. Remember, a surprise, a symptom or clue that put us onto the trail of a problem. For example, this woman is describing pain and blurriness, vision and a headache. But we need to get down below the symptom to the root cause to actually solve her problems. You know, although she's describing pain, if she has a concussion or a tumor, this requires radically different solutions. I like to say that understanding the problem you're solving is actually the superpower of an innovator. It's taking the time to go deep and say, what really are we trying to solve? Vinod Khosla is a famous investor who has been very successful. And at the core of his philosophy is this very simple phrase: any big problem is a big opportunity. He says it very simply, and I like how he frames it. No problem, no opportunity, no business. It's simple. No one will pay you to solve a non-problem. So the challenge is to find that problem. We will draw heavily on inspiration from design thinking to try to understand what problems are worth solving. Design thinking focused on seeing customers, observing customers. What do they see? What do they think? What do they feel? What do they hear? To get in their minds, in the minds of the user, to understand what problems they're facing, to understand the journey they go on as they try to solve a particular problem or job to be done, to diverge and explore many possibilities before we converge. Let me give you an example in practice. Some of you may have heard of the IBM Watson project. So this is a very novel and interesting artificial intelligence project. At first, it was simply a science project, really to solve an old computer science project for which the agreed upon solution would be demonstrated when a computer could one day beat humans at the game of Jeopardy. Well, IBM managed to solve this computer science problem and televised the event in which the computer beat the humans at Jeopardy. Now, it created an immense amount of buzz. People were talking about this computer and artificial intelligence and the future doom of humanity, right? But for IBM, it became a challenge. They had a science project. They had an invention, not an innovation yet. And the challenge, or really the secret sauce in turning IBM Watson from a science project into the core of IBM's future strategy, lay in discovering problems worth solving. And the team that led this, Mike Roden in particular, described in our interviews how the way they discovered problems to solve was by listening to customers. In particular, one thing that happened after the televised event was that oncologists, physicians who treat cancer, started calling in and asking about the event. So when IBM televised Watson beating the human beings, whenever Watson answered a question, Watson would list 3 answers and the confidence that Watson had in those answers. Well, the physicians called up and they said, well, I want to know does Watson generate more than 3 potential answers? And the answer was yes, of course, there's dozens of answers. And number 2, when you display the confidence intervals, what's that based on? And it was based on essentially a machine learning algorithm that sorted through all the texts that had been published about that particular topic, and then a confidence level based on the occurrence of the evidence in the text. For these physicians, this was great news, because the challenge that a cancer physician has is that there's so much research being done about cancer that there's actually 700,000 new pieces of evidence produced every year. And the physicians told Mike Roden they had 100% confidence that they could not read those 700,000 pieces of evidence in a year. So perhaps Watson could solve the problem. How do I keep up in my field, especially in a field that's so critical to life?